Oh boy, there are a few things that we need to discuss. I hope everything is synchronized as similar to the Sony updates. But what happens is that we finally receive today, 12th of September, the well-awaited version 5 for the Sony Fx30 and Fx3 cameras that introduces a function called shutter angle. Now, this is nothing new. We all knew about it. I just want to clarify from the beginning a few things. This video could also be taken lightly and humoristically, and just chillax and live your life happily ever after. Shutter angle in digital cameras is like almost you're trying to download more RAM from the internet instead of buying a new module. It's no real advantage whatsoever. Maybe there are a few circumstances, but other than that, you are not getting a new camera. This camera, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily suddenly becomes a real cinematic camera. It was from the beginning, or it will never be. What happens is this idea of shutter angle comes from film era, and in film era, everything was mechanical and analog. So in front of the film, or in between the film and the lens, there will be a curtain, a mechanism that will spin. So that will allow the light to impress the film for a certain numbers of seconds or fraction of seconds. And based on the shape of that particular shutter, you have a rule that is called 180 or 90 or 360 or whatever angle you wanted to use in order to get a correct exposure. People in cinema, smarter than me, they decided that for the most natural look, the 180-degree rule needs to be followed. That means if you shoot in 24 frames per second, what happens in what is happening in the film world, if you have a shutter speed of 1/48, which is equivalent of a shutter angle of 1/80, because the shutter looks like a semicircle, that would give you the most natural blur, right? So when you record images, obviously, in order to get the correct exposure, you still have to adjust the aperture, and you have to have a certain ASA rated of your film, and you need to use ND filter and control the lights and so on and so forth. So this is just a part of the equation, but it's a very important equation. Now, what am I trying to get with all this? A digital camera does not have a mechanical shutter. Not Fx30. Fx30, it's considered the cinema camera, whatever you want to consider it. I don't necessarily care, but this camera does not have a mechanical shutter. Under Bubble, it only has an electronic shutter. So an electronic shutter, it's a completely different mechanism. It turns the sensor on and off for a certain amount of time. So there is nothing else, there is no curtain, there is no angle, there is no shape of a mechanical obstruction that will be placed between the sensor and the lens in order to get the correct exposure or to let a certain amount of light fall on the sensor. This is what Fx30 is. It's a camera that has an electronic shutter. Why do you want a shutter angle? Like, how is this even possible? And what does it actually mean for Fx30 and digital world? Well, in my opinion, it simply comes from frustrated people that likes to call themselves cinematographer, but instead of impressed through storytelling and lighting, they use these technicalities, thinking that they have the edge over the rest of the population. Or I really don't know what they are trying to get. Another thing that comes into my mind is simply the fact that it helps with mathematics. Well, maybe those people are not very good at mathematics. So the real practical advantage that I see is that the moment you change the frame rate, for example, you want to record in higher frame rate, and you cannot do the math because you're going to have a shutter angle fixed at 180 degrees, that will automatically find for you the most appropriate shutter speed instead of you calculating what will be the correct shutter speed. So for example, if you want to record instead of 24 frames per second, if you want to record in 60 frames per second, your shutter speed should be 1/20. But because you're not able to do the math and you leave the shutter angle to 180 degrees, that will automatically put the camera in 1/120th of a second. I don't know if we really need that. I don't know if this saves time. I don't think it saves time. This is like a surgeon will forget to wash his hands because he's very concerned about the patient's safety. So I forgot. What do you mean you forgot to wash your hands? This is something that you have to remember before surgical procedure. So now a camera operator needs to remember that the moment it changes the frame rate, you may need to adjust the shutter speed. Like, what do you mean? I forgot. This is a very poor practice. Anyway, technology comes and saves us with this shutter angle that will do the change for you. Now, for people in PAL area, there will be a possible surface because what happens is here in PAL area, we need, especially when we shoot in artificial light, the shutter speed needs to divide into 50. Now, otherwise you may experience flicker. Now, you can still use 24 frames per second because this is a frame rate that is somehow worldwide recognized and accepted. But if you're in a PAL area and your shutter speed and if you're in a PAL area and your frame rate is 24 frames per second and you want to use 180 degree shutter angle because you're a cinematographer, then your shutter speed will be 1/48 instead of 1/50, and that will create flicker. So in order to avoid that, you have to set your camera to actually 172.8, which is ridiculous, bizarre, sounds bad, looks bad. It's like, I don't know. But that's exactly what you have to do. Now, we move back to the display itself, and if we go into the menu, like so, can we go into the menu? Yeah. You see your camera needs to be version 5, which is represented here. And in order to change the shutter speed, you go to the exposure submenu, and in the shutter mode, you have angle and or speed. Initially, camera was on speed. Now it's obviously set on angle. If you get out of the menu, you can clearly see it here at the bottom of the screen that there is a shutter angle. At the moment, it's set to 172.8. Now, if I set it to 1/50, bizarrely, the image should flicker now, but it doesn't, probably because the bulb that I have is a different type of bulb that prevents that. I'm not sure what's happening. You can also use 180 degree rule, and that will essentially put the camera in a shutter speed equal to 1/48 of a second, which is possible to introduce flicker if you're in a PAL area. I'm not sure what's happening with my indoors lights. Apparently, I don't get any flicker. I can go to other various angles. As you can see, theoretically, this should give me flicker. Practically, probably the bulb that I have avoids that. I don't really see any flicker, but a good practice tells you that you should always find the shutter speed that will divide to into 50, which is the value of the electricity grid here in Europe. Other than that, this version probably introduces some minor error corrections which are not noted. But other than that, I'm also sad to say that again, If we are shooting, for example, in H.265, we're here. No, not here. We don't need to format anything. Yeah, here in movie settings, for example, if we go in file format, unfortunately, XAVCS HS, which is H.265, unfortunately still offers only 50 or 100 hertz, respectively. I think it offers only 24 in NTSC instead of 30. So again, they didn't do any changes here. If I want to use my Ninja and I'm setting the external recorder to record only through HDMI, I cannot use shutter angle. The camera will revert back to shutter speed, which is again strange. So if you go here, external output, and HDMI output here, yeah, if you turn this to off, for example, you won't be able to access shutter angle menu anymore. So as a consequence, when you record with the Atomos Ninja, you will be able to record only in HD and not in 4K. So there are a lot of shortcomings that have not been corrected. Apart from that, what I have noticed is here there is a new picture profile, which is essentially not a picture profile but a color mode, which is called 709 tone. And this is what I'm using to record this video. I didn't investigate too much. I'm not sure what it does. Looks okay to me, but probably it's still a Rec 709 flavor. I have no other way to believe different. It's just welcome additions. Probably other content creator can explain better what it does. For me, it's either Log or Rec 709. Those are the two flavors that I'm using. Rec 709 comes with many faces. Cine Gamma and Cine S, Cineton. They all kind of look the same, and they kind of have the same dynamic range. While Log offers you a better dynamic range and is suitable for color grading. I hope that was clear. I hope that you understand that this is just a gimmick. In my opinion, if it makes you feel like you are a complete filmmaker now, go ahead and use it. I don't really see the relevance in that, and it's good that we have it. But I'm simply happy that this update came for free, like always. It would have been absolutely ridiculous for Sony to release a completely new camera just to implement this function and call it a real cinema camera. I'm happy that they did it through a firmware update, which is free. And most likely from now on, this option will be present by default in the future version. Until next time, all the best.